particular Josh and Dom for all their work during the legislative session. It was a very successful session with, just to recap, it closed up on April 22nd, Saturday the 22nd. There were 1,245 bills introduced, 271 moved to the governor's office for signature, and we're going to hear more about the details around the education bill. But again, I know how much time and effort was spent with the legislative team on that, so thank you very much. The only other comment I wanted to make in my chair's remarks was to thank everyone who was involved in the Weldon Conference. We've got a chance to formally do that since then, but what a fantastic event. We had a lot of commissioner members there, which was fantastic, and I thought the content, the attendance, and every aspect was really well done, so I wanted to publicly make a note of that, and thank everyone for their hard work. So that's it for me. Unless anybody has any specific questions for me, I will turn it over to Commissioner Locke for her report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your comments about the Weldon Conference. We agree it was a great conference this year. You made reference also to the legislative session, and we're going to hear from Josh and Dom in a little bit about the results of that session. You should know that, as has been the case in recent years, we've received some new charges out of the session and some new work that we'll be doing, and we're already about the business of establishing our timelines and starting about the work that we need to do. As I often say in the office, the good news about the increasing workload that we're getting from the Commission is that it means that policymakers believe that higher education is more important than ever. So we look at this workload as a gift. Last week, 7 members of the 2017 Faculty Nominating Committee met to consider the applications for the faculty position on the Commission. Chris and I were just chatting about, the good news of this was that we had, a large number, high number of applications that came forward, people who are really qualified, and we've submitted 4 of those names to the governor. Our former faculty member, Kent Scheller, actually chaired that work, and it was done well, and we feel good about the names that we've submitted to the governor for consideration. But we are at the same time sobered by the reality that we're going to see our current faculty member, John Conant, step down at next month's meeting, more to come next month. But we know that these 2-year terms for both faculty and student members, the challenge is just when you really are digging down deep with us, we have to say goodbye. But thank you already, and we'll have a chance to say thank you to again next month. I'm sure you know that a big announcement came on May 2nd when the governor joined with the chief executive officer emphasis to make a big announcement, one of the largest announcements they made for economic development in the state in recent years, as the company really committed to the hiring of up to 2,000 Hoosiers by 2021. They intend to have 4 United States hubs, of which Indiana is the first one that they've announced. I mentioned this today because it was clear by the people who've been invited to come to that announcement, and then there was a roundtable following it, that higher education played a critical role in their decision to come to Indiana, and that they really desire to partner with our higher education institutions to help us create the right kind of workforce for the kinds of high-paying jobs that they intend to be hiring for. I also would mention that, Central Indiana in particular, and we hope by that an extension to the rest of the state as we develop pods, is really becoming a center for, I'll mention 2 areas. One, we become foodies in Central Indiana, so there's a lot about food and dining, which is really a great thing. But we've also become a tech center. And if you look at the increase in technology, look at Indiana grew by a rate of 27.9% between just 2013 and 2015. And that's actually double the United States average. So, coasts, watch out. Middle of the country is coming on strong. We continue to try to talk a lot here about the ways that we can ensure affordability to our students in Indiana, and we try to highlight efforts that are taking place at our institutions. And today I wanted to talk just for a moment about something that's been happening at Indiana University. They have what is called an e-text initiative, and began as a pilot in 2009. I ran into Brad Wheeler who runs their technology program at a recent event, and he was mentioning this to me again. This really allows the university to negotiate a discounted rate for textbooks or for textbook materials. As I understand, more than 40,000 students, which is about 1/3 of IU's enrollment, actually got at least one textbook through this initiative, and the estimated savings for IU students for the academic year was $3.5 million. So in keeping with our ongoing discussion about cost savings and innovation and technology, this kind of brought together all three, and I thought it was worth bringing it to your attention. And Mr. Chairman, I will turn it back over to you.
Very good. Great report, and thank you. And I was remiss and pointed out by some of my colleagues that I did not mention something of great interest to the rest of us, and I'm sure to you. We wanted to acknowledge and recognize you for your honorary doctorate from Ball State University. Yeah.
I did make my husband.
Dr. Honey?
For one day, he called me doctor.
All right, enough of that. So thank you and congratulations. Much deserved, and thanks to Ball State for recognizing doctor lovers, both with her commencement speech and the document. So, let's see here. Next up is the minutes. I would entertain a motion for approval of the minutes from the March 9th commission meeting. So which you have in front of you. Second. Thank you. Any discussion, corrections, additions, etc.? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same. All right, very good. Thank you. Let's see, business items. We have a few for discussion and for approval. We're actually going to change the order around, if that's okay. We are due to Chris having to be on a phone call, I believe, here shortly. We want to make sure we get the discussion deliberation around the tuition and fee subject out of the way first, in case so we can make sure we honor his commitment and get that in front of everyone. So Don, I'm going to look to you, I believe, to lead that discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the Commission. After the enactment of the state budget, the Commission has 30 days to set non-binding tuition and mandatory fee targets for the institution. The institution then has 30 days to hold a public hearing on that and must set tuition and fee mandatory fees no later than 60 days from the enactment of the state budget for the next 2 academic years. To start off with, I'm going to show you a little historical context with tuition and mandatory fees within Indiana. This chart shows the average tuition and mandatory fee rates at Indiana's public colleges, which is the gray line. This is the percent increase over the previous year. That's the average tuition and mandatory fee rates. The blue line shows the average percent increase. And you'll see in 2002-03 there was a spike. That was due to a cut of $233 million in higher education due to the early 2000 recession. This was after the enactment of the state budget, so the institutions were forced to respond by raising tuition. The next chart shows the 2013-15 Commission recommendation, which is the red line of 2%, and it shows each institution the average of the 2 years in the 2-year increase. It was a range of 0 to 2%. This is the 2015-17 recommendation, which was 0 to 1.65%. As you can see, IU Bloomington and Purdue West Lafayette held tuition and fees flat both years. Next, I'll walk you through where Indiana compares on the national landscape. This is a chart from College Board, which shows tuition, average annual in-state tuition and fee increases for the last decade. As you can see, at our 4-year institutions, they grew by an average of 1.8% compared to 3.5% nationally. And at our 2-year institutions, they grew by an average of 2.6% compared to 2.8% nationally. Indiana ranks first in the Midwest and 5th in the nation in need-based financial aid. And in the upcoming biennium, the state again appropriated some $350 million a year in need-based financial aid. This was a report from Smart Asset that shows the best states for higher education. Indiana is new in the top 10 to this report this year, largely because of the net price. And net price is sticker price minus financial aid, grants, and tax benefits. So we've circled the net price there for number 10 showing Indiana, but 5 different factors may go into this survey, which is student-faculty ratio, undergraduate graduation rate, average net price, in-state attendance rate, and 20-year return on investment. The report did highlight Indiana as the
Oh, sorry, Tom, would you, I don't think we have these, would you mind sending those to me so I
Sure.
can email?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Go ahead and finish what you were.
The net price,
Sorry.
yeah.
Stuff right away.
Is that tuition and fees and reward, or just tuition?
It's just tuition fees. It's the sticker price minus aid and grants and tax benefits.
After the
It's cost
grants?
It's cost of grants.
Pardon?
It does include removal,
As I said, it has to, that number.
No housing?
Yes.
Yeah, it does.
Through them.
Oh, okay.
The study did highlight Indiana, and one of the primary reasons we entered the top 10 this year was because of the net price. I'll now proceed into the staff recommendation for the upcoming biennium. The staff considered several factors and used prior methodology for this recommendation, including the 2017-19 higher education budget, fiscal liability and student needs, student debt, which just crossed $1.4 trillion. And we took an inflationary approach as in the past recommendations. For this recommendation, we did an average 3-year compound annual growth rate of 6 different indices, both looking from the consumer's perspective and the institution's perspective, with HECA and HEPA indices.
Tom, what heck and HEPA are.
Higher education costs and higher education price index. And these look at the primary cost for an institution, which is staff salaries, an average of 75% at institutions. So this resulted in a 1.4% recommendation. So our recommendation would be 0 to 1.4% for the institutions. This chart shows the Hoosier per capita income, and if you look at the 3-year compound annual growth rate for Hoosier per capita income, it comes in at 1.6%. So in other words, we're not recommending an increase in tuition fees greater than the income growth for the residents of Indiana. This chart shows the impact of that recommendation of 0 to 1.4% on 2016-17 tuition mandatory fees at the institutions for 2018-2019. Purdue University did announce that they will freeze tuition at West Lafayette for 2018-19 for a 6th consecutive year, and Ball State recently announced that their base tuition will be increased 1.25% each year in the upcoming biennium as well for a June vote at their full board meeting. Any questions on the tuition fee staff recommendation?
Just to clarify, 1.6, is that per year or is that?
1.4% per year.
0.
0 to
0. So
0 to 1. You want a motion?
I would entertain a motion. Thank you. Any further discussion? Questions from Don? Chris, any comments from you guys? Comments on the budget?
This is much easier in a low inflation environment than it is in a high inflation environment.
Well, and I think it's worth noting, and Don certainly showed this information, but we've seen the lowest increases in tuition in nearly 3 decades, and we continue to see, even the ones that we anticipate might bump right up against our number slightly above, you're going to see it at a markedly lower rate than they've been before. So, I mean, this is so much in keeping with what we've been saying, which is if we're going to tell people that higher education is more important than ever, we can't price them out of that possibility, and it was just not going to be sustainable the way we're going. And so I think it's worth calling out, and I hope that members of the commission feel the same way, that this partnership we've had with the colleges and universities and the legislature to focus on affordability has really paid off. Not that we can, we have to remain vigilant about it. There are lots of reasons why this is a good story today.
IU froze it last year. They indicated this year.
We don't know yet. They have 30 days after we set ours, and we had 30 days. So their board will be meeting, and so we haven't heard an announcement of what that might be yet.
Okay, any other comments, questions, concerns? All right, hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. Excellent. Thank you very much.
I just got one other comment. I just look at Indiana compared to a place like Illinois. It's devastating what's going on over there in our education. We are by having to focus and be careful managing that as well. Major impact, positive impact here relative to what you see going on in Illinois right now.
I don't think I'm speaking out of school. Sam, you can correct me if you would prefer that I will have already said it when you corrected, so it'll be too late. But I do believe that the new president who's coming to Ball State indicated that one of the reasons he was interested is that Indiana has been incredibly stable with their funding, and you haven't seen the volatility in that kind of funding, and being able to come to a place with, where there's been a real partnership between policymakers and colleges and universities, and really focus on student success was very attractive to him.
Yes, ma'am. Very appropriate coming from a doctor. I mean, it has to be. All right, thank you very much. Chris, thanks for your good comments as well. All right, we will skip back to A on our business item list. And as referenced before, thank you, Josh and Dom, in particular, for all your work with the legislative session. And I think you're going to give us a summary and a recap of the session.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon, Commission members. Dom and I will give you an update on what happened this session, specifically to the new charges that we are facing in the upcoming year. And Dom will go over the budget and how that turned out. As was stated, of the 1,245 bills that were filed this year, 271 reached Governor Whitcomb's desk. Inside of those bills, we've identified 15 new charges for the Commission between either studies, changes to financial aid, or reports that we will have to do in the upcoming year. So we are already, even though we're only a few weeks past the end of session, well on our way into working on these new tasks. Today's report will focus primarily on the new legislation that we're facing. Previous reports were a little bit broader, but we'll focus primarily on the Commission's new charges. To start, and probably our biggest charge that we will face, and we're already hosting bi-weekly meetings between our office, the Department of Workforce Development, and the Governor's office, and then smaller meetings in the interim, has to do with Senate Enrolled Act 198 that dealt with workforce development. This bill created the Workforce Ready Grant, which you've heard quite a lot about, which provides for Hoosiers who are working age, provides for the cost to go to Ivy Tech, Vinson's, or approved providers in high-value certificate areas. The legislation outlines specific criteria that these high-value certificates have to meet, specifically employer demand, wages, job placement rates, and program completion rates. As you see, it says should have this. If, let's say, the employer demand and the wages are high, the program completion rate is not, just like we had with Senate Enrolled Act 301 last year, or in the Ivy Tech study 2 years ago, we will still look at increasing the program completion rate and not walk away from those certificate programs. We've also identified, as the Commissioner stated, 5 areas for these, or 5 sectors, which are advanced manufacturing, healthcare and life sciences, building and construction, IT and business technology, and transportation logistics. And we are working right now to identify all of the certificates that meet those or fall within factors and are in those areas.
Josh, you might just, maybe you were going to mention this, but so in working with him, we're working with the Department of Workforce Development, the way that we're identifying, are you talking about the claims?
No.
Okay, they have, DWD has come up with a system of 1 through 5 claims based on demand, and so we're looking at, and it's both credit-bearing and non-credit-bearing certificates delivered by Ivy Tech or Vinson's or approved provider in probably what would be in the 4 or 5 claim. So it would be those certificates that we know have the highest demand. And we've calculated, certainly Dom and Josh and others together have been looking at what our financial exposure is to this, what our current funding is, and our ability to do this. And we are confident that we can do this. My best my hope for this is that we will have so much demand for this that we have to go back to the legislature in 2 years and say, we need a little more money in order to be able to pay for all the people who come back to get a high value certificate. That would be a great problem to have.
Also in Senate Enrolled Act 198 is a workforce alignment study. It requires the governor's office, along with DWD, the commission, and the State Board of Education, to come up with a comprehensive workforce plan by October 1st of this year. It also requires workforce reporting that state providers, which we would be included in, provide workforce-related programs to submit annual reports on outcomes. Well, the Commission's agenda bill, House Enrolled Act 1281, has 4 separate new charges that we will be working on, and we've already started on. The first one is allowed for restoration of state financial aid when an institution closes. We are working on the process to allow students to do that. It expands state financial aid to fees for approved prior learning assessments, and it creates a non-reverting fee remission fund for our fee remission programs, which include things like children of disabled veterans or our Purple Heart recipients. And then finally, it requires the Commission to study reverse transfer. If you're not aware of the reverse transfer policy, I'm sure you've heard quite a bit about this. Reverse transfer allows a student who has left, let's say, Ivy Tech or Vincennes and started at a 4-year institution to receive an associate's degree while at the 4-year institution if they met certain benchmarks, and it would allow for the exchange of information between the 2 institutions. Ivy Tech has entered into a number of these agreements throughout the state, and we are required to look at the benefits of this policy on the statewide level. House Enrolled Act 1470 deals with the management of government data, and it has 2 main provisions. Specifically, how the Legislative Services Agency accesses information. It provides a timeline for agencies like the Commission to provide information to them during the legislative session and outside of. And it has privacy outlines on what they need to do with the data they receive. Additionally, the Management Performance Hub, which was created by executive order, has now been codified, and it establishes the position of State Data Officer within the Office of Management and Budget. This was talked about quite a bit over the course of session. The way that this will impact the Commission is we will have to look at our data share agreements and make sure that it incorporates any changes that are necessary due to providing information to the MPH. House Enrolled Act 1003 dealt with student assessments. A lot was talked about this over the last couple of years with the I-STEP test. It does replace the I-STEP test with the I-LEARN test. It has specific outlines on what needs to be included in that, including end-of-course assessments for English 10, Algebra 1, Biology for all high school students. And it also requires that a statewide assessment help students understand college and career readiness. And if that is done if that's used, that has to be done during the school day, so it allows students to take that test during the school day. It also changes the graduation qualifying exam to allow for graduation pathways. The graduation pathways could be something like a score on a nationally recognized college entrance exam, like an SAT or an ACT, a workplace certificate, scores on AP tests, or receiving dual credit. And it requires the State Board of Education to work with the Commission and the Department of Workforce Development to identify these graduation pathways that students would have to complete. Similar things have been done in the state of Ohio in recent years as well. Some additional charges that we've also received, we now will remove any money in College 529 education savings accounts from the consideration for state financial aid. We've already met with College Choice Direct on that one, on how we can automate that process and make it simpler, as well as communicate it to the students that may be impacted by their parents having a 529 account for them. And also House Enrolled Act 1617 expanded the fee remission program. I mentioned earlier we have a non-reverting fund now for that. It expands fee remission programs to children and spouses of disabled police and firefighters. This means that the students would not be charged tuition or any mandatory fees being defined, fees charged to all students.
Is disabled defined?
Yes, it has it outlined. They have to be a member of the 1977 fund, and then it has a specific definition within that on how it's defined. Additional bills of interest this session that we've talked about. House Enrolled Act 1005 provides that the governor will appoint a Secretary of Education after January 10th, 2015.
It says not that. It says it actually that they have to provide a Secretary of Education.
They shall appoint.
It says shall appoint a Secretary of Education.
As opposed to election.
2025.
2025.
Yeah, 8
It
years
actually
from now.
says they said shall.
So,
I have to go back and look at that one.
I will double check. I believe it's a shall statement. House Enrolled Act 1384 sets the Ivy Tech Board of Trustees at the number of regents plus one additional member that will be at large. And
I'm
then
sorry. I'm going to go back. May I stop you just a minute? This is different. This is the superintendent of public. If it's confusing to anybody else, this is a point. They're calling it a Secretary of Education. It's the superintendent of public instruction as opposed to a mega Secretary of Education that's over everything.
my apologies
So
for not being
that's-
clear on that one. Yeah.
I just wasn't tracking with you right. This doesn't mean that there is a one Secretary of Education. This means the superintendent of public instruction for
That was your next job,
will be
come on.
appointed. Yeah,
Gets her
sorry.
doctorate.
My apologies for not being clear on that one. Yeah, this is the election of superintendent of public instruction. It's just the new title of what we're calling it. And then Senate Enrolled Act 1423 adds our state educational institutions and private institutions that receive federal funding to the already enacted prohibition on sanctuary policies that are applied to our localities right now. Inside of the biennial budget, we also received additional studies and roles. We are required, as we've talked about, to do a performance funding study due by July 1st, 2018. We had already committed to do that. It's just now in the budget requiring that. We are also required to study the effectiveness of the academic program at Indiana Academy for Science, Math, and Humanities in Muncie. That's due November 1st. There is also money in the budget for STEM alignment for K through 12, and the Department of Education is required to collaborate with us amongst many other partners throughout the state to coordinate that to ensure access and ensure quality K through 12 STEM education. And then finally, the primary care scholarship. This was housed out of Marian University in recent years. It has been moved to the commission to be administered like the rest of our state financial aid programs here, and we will be taking over the administration of that program. With that, before we go into the numbers in the budget, which Don will cover, are there any questions?
I have a question back on the requirement for the commission, DOE, and DWD to develop a workforce alignment. Is there any clarity around, at this point in time, how that's going to move forward?
That will actually be done out of the governor's office to lead on that, and they have already sort of started reaching out a little bit, but they will be herding the cats.
Right.
This shows the overall summary of the as-passed budget. You also have a comparison document in front of you. This starts with the commission's recommendation in blue, and then we'll take you through the governor, House, Senate, and then the conference committee, which became the as-passed budget. The notes section highlight the differences between each one of those versions of the budget and the commission's recommendation. So I first wanted to highlight the performance funding percentage. For fiscal year 17, we're at 6.5%, and in 18, that percentage drops to 5.25%, but then comes back to 6.5% in fiscal year 19. They did that with 1.25% new money in year 1 and 2.5% new money in year 2. IU also received a $4.85 million appropriation for the creation of the Fort Wayne Health Services. This has to do with the separation of IPFW Health Services to IU and then other programs to Purdue. Any questions on the performance funding aspect of it? Operating in total was a 1.2% increase and then a 2.9% increase in 19 compared to 17 due to that 4.85 million, which is new operating.
The question, in the discussion and debates around the budget, how much attention was paid to performance funding?
Quite a bit. We met extensively with the chair of the Higher Education Subcommittee, both the chairman of House Ways and Means, chairman of the Senate Appropriations, and we're making our case for performance funding all throughout. The state faces significant challenges this session with infrastructure, increased funding for Medicaid, so there wasn't a lot of new dollars available, which is what we needed in order to increase that percentage of performance funding. The less new dollars you have, the more you have to reallocate, and when you're reallocating a higher percentage, the institutions that are getting hurt in performance funding get hurt worse. So this was the compromise with those funding constraints.
So it came out of the House, not quite this high level, that the negotiations continued and came back up. Our goal was to make sure that we were at least in the second year of the budget at the same level where we are now. I'm always quick to mention, and I'm sure the institutions are aware of this, that even though we're doing 6.5%, we're now, having done this as long as we have, we're at about 25% of base budgets have been impacted by performance funding.
For capital, all projects that the Commission recommended were funded, with some additional projects being funded. IU and Purdue both received some dollars for regional campus deferred maintenance. Ball State was appropriated the additional amount to fund the full cost of their project. If you'll remember, we asked them how much the Commission needed to recommend with their funding to fund their priority one. The legislature funded the project in full. Vincennes University received an additional $2 million for the diesel technology project. They entered into a deal with Cummins, which is 40 incoming freshmen that go to school for 6 weeks, go work for Cummins for 6 weeks, and do that back and forth until they graduate. And when they're done, they have a job. This is to house a facility to house the equipment needed for that kind of deal. And then Ivy Tech received an additional $3 million for Harshman Hall, which was their priority 4 project. Those are the differences in the capital between your recommendations. I'll move on to line items. Purdue did receive $1 million per year for Purdue Foods, and Think Summer was funded at $1.5 million per year. USI did receive the $750,000 security line item, which you all recommended, as well as $500,000 per year for their STEM innovation expansion. Indiana State University received $2.35 million per year for student success initiatives line item. And again, the Job Ready Education Grant, $2 million per year, and all of their high line items were helped by. Purdue did receive their full request for the Animal Diagnostic Disease Lab. They have a need for an FTE and as well as some initial equipment upgrades and things like that. Line items, dual credit was funded at $50 per credit hour in alignment with your recommendation, and R&R was funded at your recommendation all throughout, which is 0.25% of your replacement value for academic and administrative space per year. R&R is something that our committee is interested in looking at this summer to see what's happening with deferred maintenance, where we're at, how it's being addressed, and it's another summer study we're going to be looking at as well as performance funding. Any questions on the budget?
On the sheet that has the overall summary, 2017 to 19, as passed by, under state dedicated funds again, that's showing a 38.3% increase in year 1 and 54.3% increase in year 2.
Those are,
Can you remind me of that?
those have a dedicated funding source. They're funded through, for example, Purdue's wine. It's funded from the revenue from wine sales, and a lot of them are lottery funded, things like that. So specifically funded items, that's the state dedicated funds. Our recommended, we include that in there for the purposes of this and the legislature, but it's not something we recommend on because of the unique nature of the funding.
Okay, yeah, just curious about the increases. significant.
Yeah. I'll send you a breakdown of what exactly
And
these
there
are.
is just a critical number what those were.
What is that under R&R? Says fund R&R at 0.50%?
Yeah, so it's 0.5% of current replacement value of the building. So we look at when the building was constructed and take the construction index to what it would be worth today to replace that building. Then we figure out what percentage of that building is academic and administrative space, and we pay 0.25% of that for repair and rehabilitation per year. That's the appropriation.
With 0.5?
Over the budget.
That's 100. Well, 0.5%.
You might comment,
Which would be a 100-year life.
We looked at we did a lot of research on what is the appropriate amount to set aside for repair and rehabilitation. The commission did this study several years back. We used to have a very complicated formula that re-aged buildings, and we worked with institutions to come up with a new formula that just says you should be setting aside 1% of the current replacement value of the building, even from day one, even when the building doors, to pay for the R&R over the lifespan of that building. That number was large, so we said it would be a partnership between us and the institutions. So 1% is what the formula says you should be setting aside. The state is setting aside 0.25% a year. This is, again, something that we're going to look at over the summer. Is that the right amount? Is 1% the correct amount? We're going to work with our institutional partners and see how are they addressing R&R. Again, we're addressing R&R not only through the R&R formula, but many of the capital projects that you recommended were not new construction. They were R&R of an existing facility, which takes a big bite out of deferred maintenance.
Okay, any other, I think that's it, gentlemen? Thank you very
Do you
much.
want to go over this overall funding for the online?
Yeah, sure. We can go over this, the overall summary. Operating again was 1.2. This is fiscal year 18 and 19. These are the percentages are comparisons to fiscal year 2017. So when you look at 19, it's not a comparison to 18, it's a comparison to 17. Operating was increased by 1.2% and 2.9%. Debt service went down in 18 and then up in 19. It goes down because they typically appropriate debt service in year 2 of planning because they can't get the building up and running in year 1. So that's when they're setting aside that appropriation. R&R was a 5.6% increase, and that's due to the formula. Line items were increased 30% and 26.7%. Financial aid dropped slightly in year 1 and also in year 2. All of our financial aid funds were actually held flat with 2 exceptions. 21st Century Scholars is coming back down because the larger cohort sizes from the recession are moving through and graduating. So we always knew that there would be a temporary spike and it would return back to normal. And then Next Gen Teacher Scholarship is ramping up. This is going to be our first year. And so the first class, we actually just finished awarding those students. So that was the only increase in financial aid. Other higher ed line items, those are things like the commission's operating budget, the commission's admin budget, and things like that. And then capital projects cash, you'll see the differences there. You'll notice that the House funded quite a bit with cash, and the Senate kind of brought that back down to fund more with debt service in a low interest environment. And then those dedicated funds are specific dedicated revenue funds, and we'll send out a breakdown of what those are.
Question. We used to have an internal guideline as to capital and to debt service and capital. Where are we on that today?
They're about, 10% is about what we said, right?
10% of what?
Well, I'm trying, we have that information here. It was,
It's 10% of 10% of operating. So
10% of operating.
Right.
I want to make sure. Because the more things have gotten into these budgets over time, and the question, if you go back to 10%, was 10% against a different number 10 years ago than it is today. Of course, the law got the benefit of this law.
this one.
Everybody, the banks have got, some of the banks got the benefit of lower interest rates. There will be a change on that over time, but understanding what those numbers are, those components, I think, are important. Just re-educate ourselves, because you tend to forget it if you get away from
It's usually, we've usually been between 9 and 12, and, back and forth. But we've tried to stay pretty true to that number, but I think you're right.
it. It's just defining what's the
What's the
operating,
offer, yes.
what is the operating.
It's, that percentage in fiscal year 17 is 9.8%. It drops to 6.6% in 18 again due to the delay. And then it's at 11.5% in fiscal year 19.
So it goes back up.
The legislature also approved the capital project for Purdue Northwest, the biosciences facility, which was a $35 million project, I believe. That was funded through debt service.
And what are we projecting as rates?
We use 4.75%, which we feel is generous.
What?
We feel is generous, but we use the recommendation of the Indiana Finance Authority.
Any other comments or questions on the legislative report? Josh? Okay, thank you very much, both of you, for your good work and your good report. So, move along here. As part of our commission's annual college readiness report, we always do a supplement to a supplement on dual credit and the performance around that. And Stacy, I believe, is going to walk us through this year's analysis.
Sure. So as you might recall, dual credit is typically taught by a high school student or a high school teacher. At the high school, that's not always the case. It's required by Indiana law for schools to provide at least 2 dual credit as well as 2 AP, advanced placement courses, as a way to ensure that students have access to college level experience while they're in high school. And as we know, the state subsidizes certain types of dual credit, priority, liberal arts, and career technical. This is our second year to do the supplement to the college readiness report. Last year, we took an initial look about how many students were earning dual credit. We also found that last year dual credit pulls in a higher percentage of our minority and low income, as well as less academically prepared students than the AP population. So this year, we have enough data now under our belts to start examining more fully trends related to post-secondary outcomes. And so we have an additional year's worth of data, 2012 to 2015 now, and we also have more granularity in in the way that we're able to look at dual credit. We're able to determine the type of dual credit they earned, priority or technical. And so that enabled us to look at things like dual credit taking patterns, completion and time to degree trends, and again, taking a closer look at the type of dual credit and those who are earning dual credit. So again, the data cover 4 years worth of data. It's focused on the credit that's awarded by the public institutions. There are a couple of private institutions that are under the approved providers for technical and priority. Then there are other private institutions that offer other types of dual credit. We were not able to capture that this go around, but hopefully in the future. So one of the key takeaways is that again, dual credit continues to grow and it's outpacing AP across the state. As you can see by the chart, 55% of your 2015 high school graduates earned dual credit. That translates to about 40,000 students out of your 72,000 who graduated, up from 39% 3 years prior. About 20%, 18% earned AP credit. Now, there are some overlap between the two groups. There are 13% who earned both dual credit and AP. So as we move forward through our analysis, we also isolate that group as well.
Is that the 13 of the 18%?
13 of the whole entire population of graduates.
So,
So that's not actually up there on the chart.
Did you say what, 70,000?
72,000 graduated in 2015. approximately. And I remiss, this report is in your packet, it starts on page 10, and all of these charts, is data from that report.
Stacy, I'm sure that I apologize for the stupid question, but just to make sure I understand, is dual credit rigorous as AP? Are they tied together, or is AP more rigorous than dual credit? So if you take AP, you get dual credit, but if you take dual credit, you don't get AP.
They're completely separate, and so that is one of the primary factors around the conversation with quality. AP is a national exam that has standards, and then the dual credit is by institution and by the preparation of the teachers.
Okay.
The concept of dual credit is that you're supposed to have the same curriculum, the same assessment in the high school course that you had when you were taking the course in college, the same course in college.
So it would actually make more sense for a student to take dual credit than it would be to take AP.
No, because,
Well, yes, in some cases, because you get the credit. If you take AP, you don't get credit. You just get, they pass out the course, but you don't get the credit. So you still got to make up for those credits. Whereas if you get dual credit, you're taking those credits when you're into college. Right. Out of my son.
But we do have, with AP, we do have a way to translate scores into credits for courses at all of our public institutions.
But they could take the AP course and not take the exam, and then thus not get the credit. So, just a couple of points here. When we looked at our 2015 graduates, we found that on average, they were earning 9 to 12 credit hours, dual credit hours. 40% of them, 40% earned a semester or more. That's 12 or more credits. We also looked at dual credit taking across the years of high school, and we found that about 51% earned all of the credits they earned in a single year. Not surprising. And then when we look at the universe of dual credit earners, we found that 56% earned priority. And then we also took a look at our providers, and not surprisingly, our top providers, IB Tech, awarded about 60% dual credit to the 2015 high school graduates, followed up by BU at 12%, and IU Bloomington with 8%.
Stacy, I should know this, but what's priority dual credit?
So priority dual credit is your liberal arts, your advanced math, science, English, language, and then your career and technical include things like manufacturing and those things, but also education, business, computer science.
And the priority liberal arts courses were selected because they are courses that generally transfer and count toward general education requirements.
So, when we look at post-secondary outcomes, the first thing that we're highlighting here in this chart is, again, are they going to college? Are they needing remediation? Are they achieving a GPA of 3.0 or higher? And are they persisting to their sophomore year? And as this chart depicts, clearly in all of our analyses across multiple years, this pattern holds true. Your top achievers are those students who are earning both AP and dual credit, followed by your AP only earners, then your dual credit, and then those who don't earn any sort of pre-college credit are at the bottom.
there may be some surprise on some people's part that there is a little difference between dual credit only and AP only. A lot of people would, in terms of persistence to the second year, for example. And the measures are positive for all these populations compared to those who don't take AP or dual credit either one.
Is it self-selecting?
Well, we get to that. I think that's something that we would definitely want to look into further, but there's a lot of intentionality and questions around that. So.
There is a lot of intentionality, and I think the really encouraging part is how many students are now choosing to do that. We're now well over the majority of students who are actually accessing some sort of college credit, which means that they are thinking about going to college. They're saving some money when they go to college if they can actually, graduate either on time or early. And so I think, I do think there are some people who may think, I'm college material, so I'm going to take dual credit or AP, but there are a lot of others, especially in dual credit, who may have not thought that they were college material. They take dual credit, and they now think they are.
So actually, the increases here us in terms of whether we're getting intentionality developing at lower levels of the school and then manifesting themselves in more people taking a dual credit course.
Absolutely an important dynamic to be looking at. And so again, this is the first year that we were able to carry out that first cohort, 2012, into completion in a bachelor's degree. And we have a few more years for the associate. And I wanted to highlight here that our analysis shows that dual credit earners are more likely to finish sooner, on time, or early. And that national research also shows a positive relationship between dual credit and credit accumulation and degree completion. So our data are at least in parallel there. And of course, I have to say that at an individual student level, the impact of dual credit can vary. Again, depending on the types of courses that they're taking, the institutional policies, where they're at, their level of own personal preparation and grit and all of that stuff. But nevertheless, on the whole, the data show a positive story. 44% of your bachelor's seekers with dual credit graduated on time, compared to 32% of their peers. And they were about twice as likely to graduate at least a semester early compared to their peers.
Are those numbers additive or are they inclusive? Is 16% included
They're
in the 44?
inclusive. They're inclusive.
So 16 is in the 44.
Correct.
So our total is 44.
Right.
A component of that is early. Okay.
And the same pattern can be shown at the associate level. I also wanted to point out that we did a little bit of statistical modeling around this, and we found that dual credit students were more likely than expected to maintain an on-time pace. In other words, they weren't necessarily relying on dual credit as a cushion. They really truly added a boost to their credit throughout their academic career. And I think that's an interesting finding. I think it's something that we need to dig into further. Again, we had limited data, but it was encouraging. One more thing, we also looked at whether or not dual credit students were enrolling in their gateway courses, which are those initial courses that are required for a degree or a major. We found that dual credit students were less likely to have to do so, which isn't surprising because, again, these credits are counting in the transfer for library. And so, again, they're able to advance a little bit more quickly, perhaps. And I think also one other thing here is that opportunity comes into play. Those students who came into college with a large number of credits under their belt probably attended high schools that had a large number of offerings. Again, there are high schools that are only required to offer two courses. So again, there's that question of accessibility and opportunity. And the more choice they have, perhaps, the more they're able to think about what might help them with their own pathways. The last section of the report, we looked again at the differences between student characteristics and pathways as defined by the type of dual credit. The data are limited, but they do show some clear patterns at the macro level between the different populations. For example, shown in the charts, a higher percentage of technical-only dual credit are low income or identify as non-white. Technical earners are also less likely to enroll in college, 55% compared to 88% of priority earners.
But much more likely than their low-income peers.
Correct. Yep. And if they do enroll, they're more likely to pursue an associate's versus a bachelor's. Priority earners overall are higher academic achievers. In high school, they tend to have higher SAT scores. They're over 4 times as likely to pass an AP test, and they're about 3 times as likely to have earned an honors diploma. So clearly, different groups. Now, those differences go away when we look at the relatively small group of students who earned both priority and technical credit. So points to consider, and we've already touched on this a little bit. Given that post-secondary outcomes appear strong for dual credit students, and of course those who earned AP credit, an important consideration is, how do we ensure ongoing development of quality opportunities? And it gets at this, the things that you were talking about, Chris, and both Chris's. And then the questions that come to mind are, how is dual credit promoted? What supports are in place to assist students in making that intentional choice?
Who does it best in the school system?
I don't know if I have an answer to that. I can tell you based on the concentration of dual credit students by county, it looks like there are very strong relationships. For example, I forgot if we highlight
You
the
did mention it.
yeah, I'm trying to think which counties they are, but I do know that Ivy Tech, for example, has some very strong relationships with the high schools in these counties. Bartholomew, Decatur, Ripley, Jennings, as a non-user native, I'm not sure.
There's a color coding to the piece
Yes,
of the map. What's the color?
yes. So the darkest blue is the highest concentration of dual credit holders, and the gray is the least concentrated.
There's no key there.
I know, it fell off, we apologize.
It's ready though.
It's just a guess, right? And again, also want to point out that from a research standpoint, the more skin in the game a student has, the more intentionality there is around student choice, the greater predictive value these type of data have in terms of identifying student pathways and potential success. So I think there's a lot of need for more qualitative and quantitative data. So we'll see what happens.
Do we know that this is causal? I mean, I understand the relationships.
I think that,
I'm not sure I understand causality.
right, and I think that both national and current research would suggest there's some relationship there. Now, definitively causal, I can't tell
I
you.
mean, I can see this thing sort of separating based on what people worked on anyhow, without having a chance to advance. But the ones that never were engaged to do that are solely just identifying them by not participating, by not doing
And I think it's encouraging as we think about our traditionally at-risk populations, the more that population enters into these types of opportunities, how are they performing? Again, if we're able to also triangulate the types of supports that are around that, I think that gives us a clearer understanding of intentionality.
Yeah, well, one of the things we'd really like to look at is early college, which is a model in which you have a lot of support services wrapped around the courses. So it's not just some collection of isolated dual credit courses that are being taught, but you have an array of courses that lead toward the statewide transfer J-Net core or an associate degree, and wrapped around the offering of those courses are a lot of student and academic support services, in which I think have an indirect effect on getting students to think about college and to aspire to attend college and earn a degree or a certificate.
Stacy, you had a slide in here, just trying to find it, I was scanning. There was a slide that showed like IU at 8% and Ivy Tech at yes. And do all universities, all public universities in Indiana accept dual credit? And why would there be a big difference in those accepting dual credit? Is that what that shows?
Not accepting,
Am I looking at
awarding.
Awarding, okay.
But let me speak to the priority of liberal arts courses, because those are all drawn from core transfer library. So, and core transfer library is a collection of some 88 courses, almost all of which are liberal arts. And this is something that we continually review with respect to the transferability of those 88 courses. I'm not sure what the percentage is, I haven't looked at it lately, but I would say upwards of 85% transfer as a one-for-one equivalent throughout our public sector. And all of the transfer relationships are clearly identified in tables that we keep up to date each year.
And are the private universities
So we do have some privates, we're trying to expand that, but yes, there are several privates that are in it now, and we're also involving 3 or 4 additional private institutions to be part of this as well.
And when you say awarded, are you saying that, for instance, Ivy Tech has a broad relationship with a number of high schools, and that's why they're doing it?
Ivy Tech credit.
Okay, thank you.
It may be worth pointing out that although dual credit is accepted throughout the state, each individual school is allowed to set the line on the AP score necessary to accept credit from AP. So one school may set a 3 and another might set a 4 as a minimum score on an AP exam for that school to get credit.
We did do something a few years ago, John, you may recall, where the legislature did pass that you have to accept a 3, 4, or 5, but you could, there were some courses that, like, it's clear on the website, for example, if you want to be accepted at Purdue with the AP for this, you have to have a 4 or 5 in this course. So you might get the 3, they'd have to accept the 3, but they might not take it in the area.
Right.
So it's really incumbent on the student to look at the institution they're going to see how that credit will be accepted, even though a 3, 4, or 5 is required to be accepted.
So I'm curious, I don't see Purdue West Lafayette does not engage in awarding full credit. Is there, rationale around that? I see they do it at what was North Central. And
Yeah, I'm not sure there really is, just IUPUI is our campus that traditionally just has not done a lot of that. In IUPUI's case, I think it's because they're trying to, you're in an urban setting and trying to bring, students to the campus. But it's, very much really up to the individual campus to make that decision.
yes,
Did anyone by chance see the article, I think it was over the last couple of weeks, about the young lady using dual credit who's graduating from high school, high school, and her getting a bachelor's degree in the same year?
Bachelor's? I thought it was associate's.
No,
Bachelor's.
it's at the Gary 21st Century Charter School.
And,
She finished her associate degree, I think, by her sophomore year in college.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
It's pretty good. I think she'll start out as an 18-year-old, her first job, she'll get $30,000 a year.
As a teacher.
Years of, I think she's a teacher.
Yeah, the teacher, right.
wonderful. Okay. Stacy, thank you so much. Unless anybody else has any questions, move along. Excellent report. Let's see, procurement policy. So at the last Budget and Productivity Committee meeting, the staff walked the committee actually through the Commission's updated procurement policy, and I think we're going to, Don, you're going to walk us through those changes, and then we're going to need to approve the new policy for procurement.
You all approved this, essentially the same policy several years ago. We recently went through an audit through State Board of Accounts for calendar years 2014 and 2015. And although we had no written findings, we did like to work to make sure the technical language is up to date. That's really all of the changes we made to this. It's nothing substantive, only technical changes, but we do need your approval to move also with it. We use the state's procurement policies issued by Indiana Department of Administration. This policy is more restrictive than that policy. We felt that it was a little too loose. And we did incorporate several changes from the committee on things like solicitations, not being able to do on them over the telephone, must have them in writing, and so we'd like to you for your approval. I'm happy to answer any questions you have about the policy.
Yeah, it's in the book, and we had a good discussion in the committee. Chris, any additional comments on the part?
No, I think the staff did a good job of taking the input from the commission and putting it in place in the policy.
Okay, I entertain a motion for approval. We'll have additional comment. Thank you. Second. Okay, any additional comments or questions, concerns about the revised policy? None? All in favor for the approved procurement policy, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. Thank you very much. Let's see, we have 3 academic programs for expedited action, which you can find in your book, starting on page 47. The first, Bachelor of Science in Actuarial Science, will be offered by Purdue at IPFW. Bachelor of Science in Data Science and Applied Statistics will be offered by Purdue at IPFW. And a Bachelor of Arts and Bachelor of Science in Sustainability and Regeneration to be offered by Indiana University Southeast. I would entertain a motion for approval.
So moved.
Thank you. Any comments or concerns on the expedited academic programs, John?
I would like to vote against the one on sustainability, Master of Arts. I don't think that global warming is in fact correct premise. I just don't see our spending the resources to promote that type of course, and I think it's difficult. It tends to stun our economic growth as a nation in trying to reduce the low-cost energy. We need low-cost energy to keep this country on the right course. So I would.
I'm recommending you pull the first
Pull
2
that
out
one,
of
yeah.
Take a separate vote on
Separate
that.
vote, exactly. All right, so with one noted concern at this point in time for the Bachelor of Arts in Science and Sustainability and Regeneration, we'll pull that and vote on that separately and do the first 2, which I had mentioned. Any further comments or questions on the first 2 at this point in time?
Approval on the first 2.
Okay, thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Hearing no further comments on the first 2, and just to be clear, that's the actuarial science and the data science and applied statistics. We offered at IPFW by Purdue. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same. Okay, very, very good. Those are approved. Now we'll take the separate, the third one from this academic degree program approval. The Bachelor of Arts and Bachelor of Science in Sustainability and Regeneration to be offered by IU Southeast. We've got a motion and approval from, I'll entertain a new motion of approval. Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. All right, and then we'll take comment. Any additional comments or concerns other than, or in follow-up to what John said?
I would just say that global warming is a critical minor part of that program. It's not based on concepts of global warming.
Yeah, I reviewed, there's another, of course, at one of the other colleges, and I looked at it, and it's a little hard to tell, but I just don't like to see the concept of global warming promoted as a scientific fact, but that's just my idiosyncrasy, perhaps.
Duly noted. Any other comments or questions? All right, hearing none, all in favor of approval of the Bachelor of Science, Bachelor of Arts in Science, Sustainability and Regeneration at IU Southeast, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same.
Aye.
All right, the ayes have it, if you will. So the program is approved with John's concerns duly noted. All right. Capital projects for expedited action. We only have one at this point. Purdue West Lafayette, the Hampton Hall ground floor and basement renovation project, which is identified and described on page 51 of your book. I would entertain a motion for approval of that capital project.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Thank you. Any comments or concerns here? Questions? All right, hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same. All right, it's approved. So, information items beginning on page 53 of your booklets. That's it for today's meeting, other than, does anybody have any old business we haven't mentioned that we need to bring up here? Or any new business that we need to discuss or put on a future agenda? All right. Well, again, thank you so much for attending this meeting, and thank you in the audience for going through the grant quarters. And we will have a great rest of the day, and we'll see you next month. Meeting adjourned.